the mics, but I just want to thank you all for coming. I hope you're having a good convention. I know it's been a little cold, but you know, we are dude ranchers, so we do adapt. So really, let's stop bitching about the cold and just move on. Okay, so I'm going to try and follow my notes. I know that I've said this many times. I write these really prolific notes, and I do all these, and I never follow them, but I'm going to really try tonight. So, about 20 years ago, a little more than 20 years ago, for some reason, I drank the Dude Ranch Kool-Aid. And I've kind of been drinking it ever since. And there's something about it. There's something now that I'm not hurting all of you around, I am really thrilled to be delving into the history of the DRA. It's a 98-year-old trade association, which is phenomenal in its own self. But we all know dude ranching is hard. It's hard from beginning to end. It's hard from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So it's not an easy trade to be in, but for 98 years of DRA, and the DRA is close to my heart. The DRA has been helping all you guys be successful. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on the DRA. We kind of all know how dude ranching, is this way loud? Because it's, okay. We all know how dude ranch industry got started. One might say it was built out of just good old-fashioned Western hospitality, and I would not disagree. As the story goes, a non-paying guest, naturally staying at the Eaton's Ranch, suggested that he would like to stay at the ranch for an extended period of time. He would also like to pay for that privilege so as not to be a financial burden on the ranch. I would guess, I don't know this, but I would guess the word got out to other ranches that you could actually charge guests a small fee while staying at their ranch, and hence the dude ranch industry. The concept of Eastern families and friends coming out west to stay with ranchers as a paying guest began. Actually, you could say that dude ranch vacations were the first all-inclusive vacation. Dude ranching was now becoming a much bigger deal, with many successful outfits popping up in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. It did not take the ranchers long to figure out if they formed a group of like-minded ranchers that together they could accomplish much more than they could on their own. So what they did is they got together. They wanted to establish some guidelines for what was becoming a profitable industry. And we all know if you do it together, it's more profitable and it's easier to find things that are going to work than if you're trying to do it on your own. They knew with numbers behind them, they would be able to attract alliance partners who would help them build the dude ranch industry. So with encouragement from the railroad executives, from Northern Pacific Railroad, a meeting was put together in Bozeman, Montana in September 1926. The railroads put the meeting together. They then handed the meeting after the first day over to the ranchers and said, now you guys get going. You build your association and make yourself profitable and make us profitable. This meeting led to the formation of the Dude Ranchers Association. From that first meeting, it was clear that the dude ranchers were going to be just as important. And I think this is really something that most people miss. They were going to be just as important in shaping the West as the railroad, because that's what you guys did. That's what your forefathers did, is you shaped the West. I don't think dude ranchers get enough credit for that, and shame on us for not getting that word out a little more. But anyway, so a partnership was formed. The railroads to bring the Eastern folks out west, and the dude ranchers to host those folks. The railroads were willing and able to do much more promoting of the dude ranchering in ways that the ranchers could not do on their own. Looking back over the last 98 years, you can see that forming an association of like-minded ranchers was very important and helped keep the industry viable. There were so many struggles those first years. Those first-year dude ranchers went through a Great Depression. They went through world wars. They went through stock market crashes. Not to mention that the Washington boys were trying to figure out how to deal with the wilderness, national parks, conservation matters. Again, the West was in its infancy of being settled, and because of the nature of dude ranching and where it took place, it was important, very important, that all the above became forefront and center with the association, which it did. Article 2 of the 1949 bylaws of the Dude Ranchers Association states, to cooperate with the forestry officials of the U.S. government, to cooperate in the conservation and preservation of the parks and forest and the wise conservation and protection of wildlife. Two of the founding fathers, Larry Laram of Valley Ranch out of Cody, Wyoming, Charlie Moore of the Senior Ranch out of DuBois, Wyoming, were forefront and center when it came to these policies. They represented the DRA, fought hard, and I mean hard. When you read back on these minutes, it's amazing what these guys did. They fought hard against bills that would affect use of public lands and livestock grazing, all in order to protect what you guys are now currently doing your operations. The Dude Rancher magazine, and if you're not familiar with it, we'll talk about it a little bit later. It was a periodical that was started so they could place articles in this magazine that the Dude Ranchers themselves wrote and created. They would then send this magazine out to influential members of Washington and also from their guests, their Eastern guests, because they had a lot of pullback in Washington. Because some of the first owners of the DRA member ranchers were Princeton men who came out west and whose families had a lot of influence on the lawmakers of Washington, D.C., the association started recruiting associate members. And not everyone's going to know this, but back when they started in 1926, 1927, there was about 80, after the third year, there was about 80 members, but they also had 500 associate members. And who these associate members were people who were pulling the Dude Ranch, supporting the Dude Ranch Association. They were guests. They would pay. They were Washington people. They would pay to be a member. Back then, of course, it wasn't a lot. It was like $10 a year. They would receive this magazine, and in turn, they would go to fight for what you guys needed done to keep the Dude Ranchers up and running. Of course, it was, let's see, for years, the DRA had 4 times as many associate members as they did active members. Again, the DRA and Dude Ranchers helping shape the West is what this association was all about. Dude Ranchers are now and always have been a very diverse group. Shocking. So whether you are a generational rancher, whether you are a dude who fell in love with ranching and purchased a ranch, I think we can all agree the DRA has been helping the dude ranch industry and dude ranchers be successful for over 98 years. So now I just want to take a little closer look at some of the fun stuff that I find down at the museum of the Dude Ranchers Association that you guys all own. Okay, so the first one we talked about the railroad. So look at this promotional stuff on the railroad. These things are amazing. Look at this artwork. This is done, some of these are back from 1930, and they listed all the ranches. And so this is how you guys started getting Dude Ranchers back in the day. I think the railroad people knew that they needed our help, needed your help to be successful. And thank God that those early Dude Ranchers realized that they also need the railroads. So this is, the first meeting again was in September 1926. There were, let me just see, the dude ranching has grown from a boarding house proposition with an occasional summer visitor into an industry that has brought revenue of $1 million to Montana. That was back from 1927. $1 million in 1927 was a hell of a lot of money. And so they knew Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, the states were all figuring out that they needed to get on board with the dude ranches. The railroad executives and resort owners is what they called dude ranchers, just so everyone knows. You were called resort owners. back in the early days. The purpose of the meeting was to establish the cooperation and acceptance or acquaintance with railroads and resort owners, how to get guests and take care of them, which you guys all still do today. Establish a publicity and advertising plans, which you guys are still doing today. Even in the beginning, one of the main concerns was taking care of the guests. Again, the Western hospitality that Dude Ranchers are so famous for. It's been going on for 98 years and hopefully will continue to go on for another 98 years. Let's see, it was discussed at the DUDA, which I find, having run the association for around 20 years, I've sat in many, many board meetings, and we've talked about many, many things. And every year, probably every board meeting, we talked about what a dude is, what a dude rancher is, what a resort ranch is, but I found this pretty funny. A dude was men who came from the east, dudeen, which is they actually used these terms back in the day. I did find in a book that we have at the museum that's called Dude Ranch Jargon. It's from 1935, and it tells us what a dude-a-loo is, a D-U-D-O-L-O. They are a rare type of Westerner who lives by the art of sponging off dudes and dudeens. I don't know if that's you guys, I don't know if it's the Wranglers, I wasn't quite sure, but this is funny too, and not everyone will get this, but I think in this room you will. They described a dude wrangler in this book from 1936 as a cowboy given the assignment of keeping the dudes and dudeens from becoming homesick, bored, or romantically inclined. Now, I kind of thought that's what wranglers were hired for back in the day, but anyway, it's really funny stuff. The founding fathers, let me see. This is an amazing slide, and I think it's impressive. The founding fathers in 1926, these were the founding fathers. The 8 ranches in red are still DRA members that are still operating to this day. So 98 years ago, yeah. So like the Dewey River Ranch is a 7P ranch. The Oxy Oak, Montana is now the Mountain Sky. But these guys, I mean, some of them have been sold. They're not all generational ranches, but they are still operating and still doing the real, true dude ranch life, that they're trying to live. So again, very impressive, I think. Okay, so the first executive board was, of course, President Larry Laram from Valley Ranch out of Cody, Wyoming. He started the association. He was president from 1926 to 1945. It was obviously hard for him to let go of the reins. He's the longest president that we had. A.J. Congress Camp Center later became executive director of the DRA. And then Ernest Miller of Elkhorn Ranch, who was still operating, he was the first secretary. There's been 41 DRA presidents, 17 from Wyoming, 11 from Montana, 7 from Colorado, 2 from Arizona, 1 from Oregon, and then currently Janice is the first and only president from Idaho and the 4th water president. So. The old-timers, when you read about them, they were all pretty amazing men and women and very accomplished outside of the dude ranch realm. When reading about these people, you can sure see why the industry and association was able to make it, even through the hard times of the world wars, the depressions, and the growing pains of the West. Like, probably not many of you know, but Ernie Miller was actually an Olympian as a sharpshooter. I don't think that's what they call him. They were called something else, a marksman maybe. But I mean, these guys, most of them were Princeton graduates, a lot of them. Larry Laram for sure was. We're lucky that we had these forefathers to bring us to where we are today. The first directors of the DRA, I mean, look at this. This is a picture from a convention. Are these people great or what? Look at them. So these were the first directors. Again, some of these are still ranches that are operating. I want to talk a little bit about the executive directors just because they're kind of close to my heart for some reason. T. Joe Cahill was the first one from 1927 to 1932. He later became the sheriff of Sheridan, Wyoming. A.H. Conquest from 1932 to 1936. Now, in 1932, he started a magazine that was about 60 pages long. It's called the Dude Ranch Magazine. I have copies if anybody would like to see some of the old ones. But just imagine back in 1932 how hard that was. They did 4 a year. I just can't even get my mind wrapped around it, but anyway. Walter Nye, from 1937 to 1958, he was the longest serving president. He served, executive director. He served through the Depression and World War II. A little insert that I read from a 1960 executive director. These people were amazing. Some of them were just wild. To read their minutes and what they did, it was nuts. Some didn't take notes, some didn't take minutes, some of them burnt down. So, it's just crazy what I found. But in 1960, the executive director report, this is what he said. This year, your executive secretary visited 30 ranches in Wyoming and in Montana, traveling 7,000 miles. To do so, your executive secretary attended a number of state conventions dealing with the wilderness, the conservation, and the preservation of this wonderful Rocky Mountain West. Also visited and inspected 10 new ranches that had applied for active membership in the association. Now, granted, this is all done probably within a 12-week period. 7,000 miles in 1960 was a pretty good clip. So, without the executive directors, I think the Dude Ranchers would have had a little harder time being so successful. So hats off to all of them. Then I want to talk a little bit about the DRA membership. The charter members, again, there's, the charter members and the founding fathers are not the same group. There's still 4 operating lists of charter members, the 7D, the OXO, the Eatons, and the Elkhorn North. The highest number of members was in 2003 with 117 member ranches. The lowest was in 1979 with 53 members. Now I reached out, the guy who was president of the association in 1979 is still alive. His name is Stan Siggins. He's originally from Cody, Wyoming. I did reach out to him to find out, because there's 2 years that there was 53 and 56 members, and I thought, man, there must have been something, what was happening. Well, we talked a little bit today at the board meeting, and then I talked with Mr. Bill Ferguson a little bit about it, and evidently there was some sort of backhanded stuff happening at a convention, and the Colorado guy that was supposed to be president didn't get to be president, so all the Colorado ranchers dropped out, and then all the Montana ranchers got pissed off and they dropped out. And so they ended up with 2 ranches. And then also there was a guy by the name of Glenn, and we called him Chief. My husband actually worked for Chief at the time. He owned Red Rock Ranch. He got in his little car and drove to see every one of those members that dropped out and begged them to come back. He basically saved the association back then. So it's not that the association hasn't had struggles. There's probably 3 times that there was really, really a concern that the association would dissolve. So luckily it did not. The early ranchers realized that getting help from their influence guests was a paramount to keeping the industry going. That would be all the associate members, that would be Gene Kilgore, that would be David McCullough, that would be anyone, that would be the railroad people. Without those people, we would not be in this room right now. And so I know it's easy to say, oh gosh, they're vendors, or they're not doing it the way we want it, but without them out there always fighting for us, guys, we wouldn't be here today. So always remember that when you see those old timers that really went to bat for us. I heard the story, Gene Kilgore was the first one, he went on the Johnny Carson show to promote dude ranching, okay? How big was that? We have 2 letters at the DRA office, one from Ronald Reagan and one from George Bush, thanking us for what you guys do. One of them is addressed to Gene Kilgore. So he has gone out for us. I'm not here to tout about Gene Kilgore, even though I love the guy, but But I just think we always have to remember where we come from and who helped us get there. Okay, let's talk a little bit about conventions. This is an old convention. This was Paul Christensen, Tom Ferguson, Bill's dad, and Big Bones Anderson. I mean, they even had cool names, didn't they? Big Bones Anderson. Who doesn't want to know him? I do. Okay, at the DRA conventions, there was only one time that the DRA did not have an actual in-person convention, and that was in the 95th, and that was because of COVID. They did have a couple in the same year as they used to have a convention in November, which you might want to consider going back. The weather might be a little nicer in November. So they had 2 in 1 year, and so the vote was kind of, anyway. So there was 33 in Montana, 32 in Wyoming, 14 in Arizona, 6 in Colorado, 5 in California, 4 in Idaho. In Texas, they've had one other convention. This is the second one. And I wasn't here, that was before my time, but I heard it was a pretty big show that year as well. I believe you guys went out and sold signs to ranches that weren't members or couldn't become members. You know, I think you guys misbehaved quite. I'm surprised they let you back in Texas, actually. And just to talk about some of the topics of the early conventions, insurance rates. Funny how that, people were still talking about that. In the very first meeting, they were talking about tipping. How do we handle tipping? Should we accept tipping? Do we let the girls take the tips? Should boys just get the tips? I mean, it's all over the place. It's wild. This is really cracks me because we talk about this a lot. So they evidently had some booking agents that came on board in New York, Chicago, and Detroit. Should we actually work with the booking agent or a travel agent? You know, are they going to do us any good? And if they book a trip and that guest comes back the next year, should we pay them for that trip? I mean, we're still talking about that, so we haven't quite figured all that out yet. So, I mean, for years, with this still, you guys can attest to this, we're still talking about this at board meetings, so right or wrong, that's what we're doing. So, again, I just wanted to show you a couple ingenious programs from the conventions. Will James, I thought that was great. He actually illustrated a few of our convention covers and wrote his personal messages. So I just, again, where did they get this stuff? I mean, back then it's just amazing. So I just find this stuff, and that we have it is amazing to me. Okay, the Dude Ranch magazine, again, this is a quarterly magazine that was printed out 4 times a year, about 60 pages. It listed all the members, all the associate members. They had a women's management page. The big articles were always about, the president always did like a 2 or 3 page spread talking about the state of the association. Article from, all articles talking about conservation. There was always articles from the Fish and Game, from every state Fish and Game, from every state wilderness association, from outfitters. So, I mean, they were just really, really involved in that kind of stuff, and I think they had to be, again, because that's all that was happening. I mean, you had to bring these guys on as partners, or you weren't going to have the land to operate on. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up pretty quick here, I think. So I also found this great. One of the topics was, so if a dude has a guest and brings it to your ranch, what do? Do you actually serve them a meal? Do you turn them away? And if you do serve a meal, do you charge them? So back in 1932, they all agreed that you should charge them 50 cents per meal. Oh, and Dan, or any insurance guys, you're gonna love this. Should guests be allowed to drive a ranch car? Well, no. And when you say no, you need to blame the insurance companies. Swear to God, that's what it said. It's so funny. So funny. So the DRA kind of then and now. This was, the top logo is actually the foundation logo now, but it was actually the original DRA logo. The middle logo was bottom one is the most recent one. And I found this to be very good because we're always talking about categorizing ranches, working ranches, dude ranches, resort ranches. This is how they described it in the 1932 magazine. A working ranch was riding is primarily emphasized. A dude ranch, riding is emphasized, just not primarily. And resort ranches is riding is available. This is what we talk about now because we're trying to make everybody happy. So we went from two word categories to a paragraph. So, but you got to do it to keep up with the times, right? I mean, I think they're all worthy. I think they're all good, but it's just it's just to me it was just kind of fun how we have to keep up with the times. This is another big issue. When I was the director, it was all about how do you qualify to be a member of the DRA? Literally, probably the first 20 years to be a member of the DRA, you had to just actually be engaged in operating a dude ranch. You didn't have to do anything else. You didn't have to charge a certain amount. You didn't have to have guests stay a certain amount of time. You just had to be engaged in operating that dude ranch. In 1949, it was, in 2004, it was amended to read, during the primary dude ranch season, transient trade shall not disrupt or detract from the dude ranch guest experience. So everything in the blue was taken away and that line was put in. And it was there from 1949 to 2004. So they were just trying to update it to be more inclusive. Because as we all know, dude ranches have changed over the years. Again, the minimum stay was always a big deal when I was here and we were talking about a board meeting. Well, come find out it was never in the bylaws. It was always just in the policy manual. And the 3-night minimum stay was required up until 2006. Then it read, history and heritage in the DRA is to encourage 1-week stays or longer. The declared dude ranch season must be at least 8 week longs. A minimum 3-night stay may occur, but is not the norm during the declared dude ranch season. And then of course we created the wonderful 6 H's, and that's kind of alleviated a lot of that issue as well. So again, ever changing, you have to keep changing if you're going to stay in operation for 98 years. Okay, because this report is about the history of the DRA, I would be remiss if I did not talk a bit about the Educational Trust, because that is what I am in love with now, and that is who I am supporting and why I am up here. When the Very Smart DRA board members established the nonprofit arm of the DRA 35 years ago, it was a way for the association to give back through the scholarship program. It has continued to evolve, and now not only does it give back through the scholarship program, which since its inception has given over $455,000 to very deserving students. We have created a horse safety program. We are now the protector and the keeper of the history and the heritage of the DRA through the Dude Ranch Museum. 20 years ago, the board, I happened to be there. I was not the executive director. I was just the assistant. Happened to be there when the board came up with the idea that we needed to have a home. We needed to have a full-time home. We needed a place to keep our stuff. And so these very forward-thinking, brave souls gathered money, most of them putting in their own money from their own pockets, and bought a building. And that's been our home for the last 20 plus years. I, of course, because I grew up in it and I kind of helped form it, it means the world to me. I would love for anyone that has not been there to come and see us. One of our goals in the next few years is going to be to become the actual experts of dude ranch, the history of dude ranching. We're going to build out a website that is just going to be focused on the history of dude ranchers and dude ranching. You don't have to qualify, you don't have to be a member, you don't have to do anything. If you've got a historical ranch, we're going to put you on the website. Again, we want to be the place where people come to find out about dude ranching. What we do now is we send them to your personal ranches. We want to gather it all in one place. So that's a little bit of the history of the DRA. And I think we can all agree the many accomplishments of this association over the last 98 years is nothing short of amazing. Each generation has stepped up to the plate to help the DRA and the industry stay relevant throughout the years. If you continue, in my opinion, to work together, to pull together an association, to get behind your association, and for the betterment of the industry and the DRA, and hold true to the core values the Founding Fathers laid out for you, the next 98 years will be just as amazing. Again, I hope you all have a great convention. Thanks for letting me be a little part of it again this year. I know you're sick of seeing me over the last 22 years, so I appreciate it, and thanks for coming. Oh yeah, don't forget to get your checkbooks out at the auction.
There goes the walking history book of the Dude Ranch Association. And I think we need to give her another round of applause.